The city's grime felt like a second skin, a permanent layer of grit under Cora's fingernails. The savory scent of pork broth from a street-side ramen stall was a cruel temptation, a ghost of a meal she couldn't afford. Her stomach twisted into a tight, aching knot. Steeling herself, she approached the owner, a stout man with a weary kindness in his eyes. "Excuse me, sir," she began, her voice barely a whisper. "I haven't eaten all day. Would it be possible to have a bowl of noodles? I can come back and pay you tomorrow." "I swear." The owner's eyes softened as he took in her pale, drawn face. He was about to nod when his gaze snagged on the clean, though faded, fabric of her jacket and the neat way her hair was tied back. He'd seen plenty of people on the street, and this girl didn't fit the part. His expression hardened with suspicion. "You look a little too put together to be begging for food," he grumbled, wiping the counter with a damp rag. "What's the scam? Trying to get a free meal when you're probably loaded?" The accusation struck Cora like a physical blow. Tears welled instantly, hot and shameful. "No, it's not like that." Her hands fumbled inside her jacket, retrieving a worn envelope thick with cash. She held it out, the paper trembling. This is for my mum's surgery. Every single dollar. I can't touch it. I can't." Her voice cracked, the raw desperation silencing the few other customers slurping their noodles. She pulled a delicate silver bracelet from her wrist, its single charm catching the dim light. "Here. It was my mother's. Please, hold it as collateral. I'll collect enough bottles tonight to pay you back. I promise." The owner's gruff facade crumbled. He looked from the wad of cash, a lifetime of savings. He guessed to the girl's tear-streaked face. "Surgery. Kidney transplant," Cora choked out. "I'm the donor, but we still have to pay for the procedure." A heavy silence fell over the small stall. The man stared at her, his suspicion melting into a profound, aching respect. He pushed the bracelet gently back into her hand. "Keep it," he said, his voice thick. He turned and ladled a generous portion of noodles and steaming broth into a large bowl, adding extra slices of pork and a perfectly soft-boiled egg. "On the house," he declared. An elderly woman at the counter slid a $20 bill toward Cora. A young man in a construction vest added a 10. Soon, a small pile of money and the takeaway bag filled with food sat before her, a testament to the sudden, overwhelming kindness of strangers. Revitalized by the meal and the unexpected charity, Cora's resolve hardened. A few hours later, she stood on a bustling Market Street corner, a small mountain of watermelons stacked neatly on a blanket. The sun beat down, but she ignored the sweat trickling down her back, her voice clear and steady. "Sweet watermelon. Get your fresh, cold watermelon here." She'd made a few sales, the small profit a welcome addition to the envelope tucked safely away. It was a slow, grueling process, but it was progress. That hope was shattered by the screech of tires as a police cruiser pulled up to the curb. A stern-faced officer, his name tag reading Cole, stepped out. His eyes, cold and dismissive, swept over her makeshift stall. "You got a permit for this?" Cora's heart plummeted. "No, officer." "But." "No buts," he cut her off, his tone leaving no room for argument. "You can't sell here. It's illegal." "Pack it up." He began lifting the watermelons, his movements efficient and unfeeling, and placing them in the trunk of his car. Panic seized her. "Please, don't," she cried, rushing forward. "You don't understand. My mother is in the hospital. She has surgery tomorrow morning. I need this money. It's all I have." Officer Cole didn't even look at her. "Everyone's got a story. The law is the law." Across the street, the silent hum of a black luxury sedan was broken by a quiet command. "Hold on a moment," Simon Flint murmured to his driver. His gaze was fixed on the scene unfolding on the sidewalk. He saw the girl's frantic desperation, the genuine terror in her eyes as she pleaded with the impassive officer. He watched as she tugged on the policeman's arm, her small frame shaking with sobs, only to be brushed aside. Something about her fierce, hopeless fight resonated with him, a dissonant chord in his carefully orchestrated world. He saw the officer shut the trunk, get back in his car, and drive away, leaving the girl utterly alone and defeated on the pavement. The image burned itself into his mind. Cora sank to her knees on the empty blanket, the vibrant energy of the market fading into a dull, muted roar. He had taken everything. Later that evening, the sterile quiet of the hospital felt suffocating. Cora sat by her mother's bedside, holding her hand, the weight of her failure pressing down on her. She had nothing left. Cora, she looked up to see Dr. Jennings, her mother's surgeon, standing in the doorway with a kind, weary smile. He stepped aside, and Cora watched in confusion as a nurse, then an orderly, and even an elderly patient from down the hall approached her bed. Each of them placed an envelope in her lap. "I don't understand," she whispered, looking at the small collection of donations. Dr. Jennings's smile widened. "You have a stubborn guardian angel, it seems. His name is Officer Cole." Cora stared at him, bewildered. Cole. But he took everything. He sold everything. The doctor corrected gently. "For double what you were asking. He dropped off the proceeds an hour ago." He handed her one last, thick envelope. "This one's from him. Apparently, it's about half his paycheck. He does this for all the illegal vendors he has to clear out. Says it's safer to be robbed by a cop than by the gangs that run these streets. He just wanted to make sure you were safe." Cora opened the envelope. Inside was a thick stack of bills, far more than she could have ever made. Tears streamed down her face, no longer of shame or despair, but of a profound, soul-shaking gratitude. For a moment, a flicker of hope ignited in the darkness, a small, fragile light against the overwhelming odds. The antiseptic scent of the hospital hallway did little to mask the smell of fear that clung to Cora like a second skin. In her worn canvas bag, she clutched the tangible form of hope. Stacks of cash, wrinkled and worn, collected piece by piece from recycling centers and grim odd jobs. It was enough. Finally, it was enough for her mother's surgery. Lost in a prayer of gratitude, she rounded a corner too quickly, her shoulder colliding with another person in a jarring thud. "Watch where you're going, you filthy rat." The voice was sharp enough to cut glass. Cora stumbled back, her eyes landing on a woman draped in a cream-colored Chanel suit, her face a mask of theatrical fury. In her hand, she held up a pristine white Hermes bag as if it were a wounded dove. A faint smudge marred its perfect surface. "I'm so sorry," Cora stammered, her heart hammering against her ribs. "I didn't see you." "Sorry." The woman, Heidi Lane, let out a laugh that was more of a sneer. "Do you have any idea what this is?" "This is a Birkin. My father had it flown in from Paris. You think Surrey is going to fix the damage your poverty has inflicted upon it?" She pointed a perfectly manicured finger at the tiny mark. "That's a $30,000 cleaning fee. At least, pay up." Cora's blood ran cold. 30,000. The words were a choked whisper. "I don't have that kind of money. It was an accident. Heidi's eyes narrowed into venomous slits. "People like you don't have accidents. You stage them. You see a person of quality, and you throw yourself in their path, hoping for a payday." Before Cora could react, Heidi's hand shot out, snatching the canvas bag from her grasp. The worn zipper gave way, and the contents spilled onto the polished linoleum floor. The crowd of onlookers gasped. It wasn't garbage or old clothes that tumbled out, but thick, bound wads of cash. Heidi stared at the money, a cruel, triumphant smirk twisting her lips. Well, what do we have here? Looks like you do have the money after all, you little liar." She began scooping the bills into her own expensive handbag. Panic, raw and absolute, seized Cora. No, please, that's not for you. That's for my mother's surgery. She'd die without it. She cried, lunging forward, trying to retrieve the precious bundles. Please, I'm begging you. Heidi kicked the last of the money away from Cora's desperate fingers. Your mother. She looked down at Cora, her expression dripping with a profound, chilling indifference. Then she can die for all I care. This is my money now. A lesson for gutter trash who don't watch where they're going. A murmur of outrage rippled through the onlookers. That's monstrous. Someone whispered. She's stealing from that poor girl. The condemnation only seemed to fuel Heidi's rage. Shut up. She shrieked at the crowd, her face contorting with fury. She turned back to Cora, who was on her knees, sobbing. You think you can embarrass me? With a vicious shove, she sent Cora sprawling backward, her head cracking against the wall. Heidi raised her hand, ready to strike again. That's enough. A calm but authoritative voice cut through the chaos. Officer Cole, his expression grim, stepped between them. His presence was a solid wall of order in the swirling vortex of cruelty. Ma'am, I've seen the security footage. You will return that money and place your hands behind your back. You're under arrest for assault and robbery. Heidi stared at him as if he were an insect. She laughed. A high, unhinged sound. Arrest me? Do you have any idea who I am? I am Heidi Lane. My father is Parry Lane. One phone call from me, and you'll be directing traffic in the middle of nowhere for the rest of your pathetic career. Officer Cole's jaw tightened, but his voice remained steady. I don't care if your father is the president. In this hospital, you assaulted a woman and stole life-saving money from her. Justice is the same for everyone. He reached for his cuffs. As he moved, a faint groan came from the nearby room, the room where Cora's mother lay. The door was ajar. Cora scrambled to her feet, her own pain forgotten, and saw her mother, propped up on one elbow, her eyes fluttering open for the first time in weeks. A thin trickle of blood, dislodged by the impact of Cora's fall against their shared wall, ran from her mother's temple. Mom, Cora whispered, tears of shock and hope mixing with her fear. Seeing her victim's attention diverted, Heidi saw a new target. A final, despicable way to assert her dominance. You want to worrying about your mother? She snarled, a truly malevolent glint in her eyes. She lunged toward the hospital room, her hand raised to strike the frail, barely conscious woman. Cora threw herself in front of the doorway, spreading her arms to shield her mother. It was a primal, desperate act of protection. All the fight, all the humiliation, coalesced into a single, heart-wrenching cry that tore from the depths of her soul. Dad! The word hung in the air. A desperate, impossible plea. Just as Heidi's hand was about to connect with Cora's face, it was stopped mid-air, caught in a grip of absolute steel. The hallway had gone silent. A figure stood there, his presence so immense and powerful it seemed to suck all the air from the space. Simon Flint, CEO of Flint Industries, was dressed in a flawlessly tailored suit that bespoke unimaginable wealth and authority. But it was his eyes that held everyone captive. They were chips of ice, burning with a cold, protective rage that was terrifying to behold. His grip on Heidi's wrist was unyielding. He looked past the sputtering, entitled woman, his gaze locking onto Cora's tear-streaked face. His voice was low, a controlled rumble of thunder that promised a devastating storm. Let go of my daughter. He paused, letting the words sink in, his eyes boring into Heidi's. I'm her father. The chaos of the hallway stilled, held captive in the space between heartbeats. Simon's arms were a fortress around Cora, his large frame shielding her from the world. His gaze, however, was fixed on the delicate, petal-shaped birthmark just below her ear, a mark his mother had always called a dragon's kiss, the same mark he traced on his infant daughter's neck 2 decades ago. "It's you," Simon breathed, his voice a raw mix of awe and anguish. The words were not a question, but a confirmation that shattered the last of Cora's defenses. "You're my daughter," Heidi scoffed, her face a mask of derision. "Are you insane? This trash picker, you're..." Crack! The sound was sharp, definitive. Simon moved with a speed that belied his size. His hand connected with Heidi's cheek, snapping her head to the side. A collective gasp echoed from the onlookers. Before she could recover, he struck her again, a backhand that sent her stumbling against a wall. "The first was for lying to me," he snarled, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "The second was for humiliating my daughter." He took a step forward, his shadow engulfing her. Crack. A third, final slap, and that was for daring to harm her mother. Heidi cradled her reddening face, her eyes blazing with fury and disbelief. "You hit me. Do you know who I am? My family will ruin you, Simon Flint. They'll tear your entire empire apart." Simon merely smiled, a chilling, predatory expression that held no warmth. "Good," he said, his tone deceptively calm. "Bring them. Bring everyone you've got. I want to see them try." As if on cue, the elevator doors out of the hall slid open. A procession of imposing figures emerged, led by a stern-faced, silver-haired man who radiated an authority that dwarfed even Simon's. Grandpa Flint. He was flanked by Simon's two brothers, their expressions grim. "Simon," the old man's voice boomed. "What is this commotion? We were told there was an emergency." His sharp eyes scanned the scene, the cowering Heidi, the protective stance Simon held over the pale, trembling girl, and the woman on the gurney who bore a striking resemblance to a ghost from their past. Simon didn't release Cora. "Father, I found her." He gently tilted Cora's head, revealing the dragon's kiss. "I found my daughter." A wave of shock rippled through the Flint men. Grandpa Flint's stern facade crumbled, his eyes widening as he stared at Cora, then at Mabel on the gurney. "It is her," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. He turned his gaze, now glacial, upon Heidi. "And who is this creature?" She was tormenting Cora and Mabel, a nurse supplied timidly. The patriarch's face hardened into granite. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The quiet command carried the weight of a death sentence. "Crush them," he ordered his security detail. "Heidi's family, their business, their associates, everyone. I want them bankrupt by sunrise. See to it that she and her family are apprehended for their illegal activities. I never want to see their faces again." The guards moved with silent, terrifying efficiency, seizing and now screaming Heidi and her entourage, dragging them away as their threats faded into pathetic whimpers. The world dissolved into a surreal blur for Cora. One moment she was in a sterile hospital corridor. The next, she was being guided through the towering doors of the Flint family mansion. The sheer scale of the place stole her breath. Ceilings vaulted into the heavens, dripping with crystal chandeliers. The marble floors gleamed like polished ice under her worn sneakers. A line of maids in crisp, black and white uniforms bowed in unison, their presence more intimidating than welcoming. She and her mother were led into a living room larger than any house Cora had ever been in. Mabel, now awake and bewildered, sat beside her on a plush velvet sofa. Grandpa Flint and Simon's brothers immediately descended upon Cora, their faces alight with a mixture of profound joy and deep-seated guilt. "My dear granddaughter," Grandpa Flint said, his voice now gentle as he knelt before her. He pressed a heavy velvet-lined box into her hands. Inside, a diamond necklace glittered with the fire of 1,000 stars. Her uncles followed suit, presenting her with deeds to properties, keys to luxury cars, and a portfolio of stocks that made her head spin. Overwhelmed, Cora looked at the mountain of wealth accumulating in her lap. The extravagance felt alien, almost frightening. She clutched the diamond necklace, her small voice cutting through the opulent air. "This is all for me." She glanced at her mother, her brow furrowed with earnest concern. Can my mum have some too?" The raw innocence of her question silenced the room. A pang of regret shot through Grandpa Flint. He placed a warm hand on her head. "My child, everything we have is yours and your mother's. You will never suffer again. You'll attend the best university, wear the finest clothes, you will have the life that was stolen from you." He shot a glare at his son. "A life you should have had all along if your father had been competent enough to find you." Simon accepted the rebuke with a tight jaw, his eyes never leaving Cora. After his father and brothers had offered their gifts, he stepped forward, a quiet intensity in his gaze. He presented her not with jewels or deeds, but with a sleek, platinum watch. "This isn't just a timepiece," he explained, his voice low and serious. "It's a direct link to me. Press this button and whatever you want, wherever you are, I will make it happen. No one will ever bully you again." He fastened it around her slender wrist, the cool metal a stark contrast to her warm skin. He held her gaze, his expression softening into one of pure paternal love. But then it shifted, a flicker of old bitterness clouding his eyes as he glanced at Mabel. He leaned in, his voice a conspiratorial whisper meant only for Cora. "I will give you the world, my daughter. But be careful. Never forget that your mother is the woman who abandoned us for money all those years ago." The private hospital room was a sterile cocoon of white, smelling of antiseptic and starched linen. Sunlight, stripped of its warmth, filtered through the blinds, casting pale stripes across Mabel's sleeping face. Cora sat vigil, her hand wrapped around her mother's, tracing the delicate, paper-thin skin. The doctor's words echoed in her mind. A kidney transplant was the only long-term solution. A solution Cora was ready to provide. Mabel's eyes fluttered open, the grogginess of her medication giving way to a fierce, paternal clarity. Her gaze fell on her daughter's determined face, and she knew instantly what Cora was thinking. "No." Mabel's voice was a dry rasp, but it held the unshakable force of a mother's will. "Absolutely not. Cora, I won't let you." "But Mum, it's a perfect match." The doctors said. "I don't care what they said," Mabel interrupted, pushing herself up on her elbows. The effort cost her, a wince tightening her features. "My life is not worth a piece of yours." "That's not how this works." The door creaked open and Lena, Mabel's oldest friend, slipped inside, a container of warm soup in her hands. She took in the scene, the stubborn set of Mabel's jaw, the desperate tears welling in Cora's eyes, and sighed. "She needs to know, Mabel," Lena said softly, pacing the soup on the bedside table. "She's not a child anymore. She deserves the whole truth." Mabel's gaze dropped to the white blanket. "It doesn't matter now." "It matters," Lena insisted, her voice firm. She turned to a bewildered Cora. "Your mother can't accept your kidney, sweetheart, because she only has one left to give." Cora's head snapped up. "What?" Lena's eyes were fixed on Mabel, urging her to speak. When she remained silent, Lena continued, the story tumbling out like a long-held secret. "Years ago, before you were born, your mother was in love with a brilliant young man, an artist, with a fire in his soul, but not a penny to his name. He got sick, very sick. His kidneys failed. The air in the room grew thin, heavy with unspoken history. The doctors gave him months," Lena said. "Mabel was his match. She didn't hesitate. She gave him one of her kidneys, anonymously, through a paired exchange program. She saved his life." Cora stared at her mother, seeing not just a frail, sick woman, but a hero. "Who was he?" she whispered. Mabel finally looked up, her eyes swimming with a sorrow so deep it felt ancient. "His name was Simon Flint. He was going to be someone great, I knew it. But his family, they would never have accepted a poor girl with no connections. And after the surgery, a wife with only one kidney, I would have been a burden, a liability. So I left. I wanted him to have a bright future, unburdened by me. The weight of her mother's sacrifice crushed Cora. All those years of struggle, of collecting trash, of being hungry and cold, it was all an act of love. A profound, heartbreaking act of protection. As if summoned by the mention of his name, the door swung open with force. Simon Flint stood there, his tailored suit a severe slash of navy against the sterile white. His face was a mask of granite, but his eyes burned with a cold blue fire. He had clearly heard the last part of the conversation, and his mind had twisted it into the ugliest possible shape. A burden, he clipped out, the words sharp as broken glass. His gaze landed on Mabel, ignoring Cora completely. Is that what you told yourself? After all these years, you reappear, and just in time for the press releases. You always did have impeccable timing. He advanced into the room, his presence sucking all the oxygen from the air. Tell me, was this the plan all along? Leave the broke artist, then circle back once his name was on the building? A gold digger, then and now. The accusation hung in the air, vile and unfair. Mabel paled, too weak and too proud to defend herself against the ghost of a man she had once loved. She simply met his furious gaze with a profound, shattering sadness. Cora couldn't bear it. She scrambled to her feet, placing herself between them, a small, trembling shield. "Daddy, please," she begged, her voice cracking. "Mum, please don't fight." A word "daddy" from his daughter, laced with such raw fear, was the one thing that could pierce Simon's armor of rage. His icy facade fractured. He looked down and saw not the woman who had abandoned him, but a terrified child caught in a war she didn't understand. His entire demeanor shifted. The anger receded, replaced by a storm of confusion and regret. He knelt, bringing himself eye level with Cora. "We're not fighting, sweetheart," he murmured, his voice suddenly gentle. He reached out, his hand hovering for a moment before he gently brushed a tear from her cheek. "Just talking," he rose, his gaze finding Mabel's again. The fury was gone, but a deep, unreadable chasm remained. "Flint Industries is hosting a welcome party for Cora at the mansion tomorrow evening," he stated, his tone now clipped and professional. "You will be there for her." It was a command, not an invitation. Then, as if it were a minor business detail, he added, "Your medical costs are being handled. I've made a call to Dr. Aris. He's the best transplant surgeon in the country. He'll be taking over your case." It wasn't an apology, it wasn't forgiveness, but it was a lifeline. A gesture so significant it left Mabel breathless. It was a promise of care, an act of responsibility from a man still nursing a decades-old wound. The next afternoon, a different kind of visitor appeared in Mabel's room. Eleanor Flint, Simon's mother, was the epitome of old money elegance. Her silver hair coiled perfectly, her posture regal. She carried not flowers, but a simple, sealed envelope. The DNA test was merely a formality, Eleanor said, her voice surprisingly warm as she studied Mabel. "I knew the moment I saw Cora. She is Simon's focus, but your heart is in her eyes." She placed the envelope on the bedside table. "We released a statement to the press this morning. The world now knows that Cora is a Flint, the sole heir to my son." Tears welled in Mabel's eyes, tears of pure, unadulterated relief.